Biznology Digital Marketing Webinar. My name is Frank Reed. I'm one of the bloggers here at Biznology. I'm also the managing editor of the Marketing Pilgrim blog, which is currently number 25 on the Ad Age Power 150. I also consult with small and medium businesses in the SMB market regarding effective online marketing through my business Local Basics. Today, however, you'll be hearing from Mike Moran. Mike is the founder of the Biznology blog, and he will be presenting Untangled Web, Why White Hat SEO is the Way for You. As we wait for more attendees to join us, let me review the format of the webinar for you. Our Biznology webinars, they last just about 30 minutes, so excuse me, you can easily fit them into your busy schedule. We record each webinar, and we'll email you that link later this week. During the speaker's presentation, you can use your GoToWebinars controls to ask a question. That orange arrow opens and closes your webinar controls. So if you have a question, simply type it into the box labeled questions at any time during the event and press the send button. And I'll select a few questions at the end of the webinar and pose them to Mike. Okay, so while we're waiting for the last few attendees to join, I'd like to remind you that Biznology newsletter and blog are available for free at biznology.com. So if you're not already a subscriber, we'd love to have you sign up today. So thanks again to all of you for spending the next 30 minutes with us. We know how valuable your time is, so let's introduce today's speaker. Mike Moran is the founder of the Biznology blog, a well-known expert in all things digital marketing, and the chief strategist at Conversion, a leading social consultancy. Mike is the co-author of Search Engine Marketing, Inc., and the sole author of Do It Wrong Quickly. Mike is a veteran of IBM, managing groups in IBM.com for 8 years, and retiring from IBM in 2008 as a distinguished engineer. So if you've ever struggled with how to optimize for search in today's changing climate, this is the webinar for you. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Frank. So one of the things that I think we've all just gotten used to over the years is that marketers have the drop on their customers. There's so many businesses where marketers know so much more about their product than their customers will ever know. And a lot of them are businesses where the customers don't actually buy the product very often. So we've got some examples up on the board here. So buying life insurance, selling your house, picking a credit card. There's all sorts of times when you have to do something, but you don't really feel like an expert in it. And marketers can take advantage of that situation. And in fact, over the years, that's what marketers have done. Marketers pull the wool over people's eyes. They fool you. They're trying to figure out how they can get the edge on you. And this has worked, unfortunately. Over the years, businesses have gotten poorer and poorer reputations, and a lot of it has been because they are fooling people. And the question is, does your business depend on that? Have you been marketing that way? And we're going to apply all of these kinds of questions to search marketing before we're done. The thing that's happening, though, that's bigger than search marketing is that things are changing. It used to be that travel agents and airlines had the drop on consumers, but not so much anymore. There's all sorts of ways for you to get a deal on an airline ticket that in the past you might have been at the behest of a travel agent where they would show you whichever ones they wanted to show you, and you would pick what you wanted to pick, and you might not see all of the choices. And so now it's far easier for you to get that kind of transparency where you can see everything that's going on in the market. That's what the Internet does. The Internet makes it much harder for companies to fool their customers. The Internet lets customers evaluate competing claims. It's not just about pricing. So if you say, I have the cheapest flight, then you have to prove it. If you say, I don't charge for baggage, I include meals and they don't, there's all sorts of things that airlines can say. But the truth is that on the Internet, you can now read reviews, you can read ratings, you can read the experiences of other customers. You can figure out who's telling the truth and who isn't. And that's something that's very, very different from how things used to be. The other thing that's happening is that the Internet is now becoming a force for good behavior. It used to be that only big companies had to really worry about being called on the carpet for their ethical lapses. there'd be Enron-size mistakes that the government would crack down on. Or there would be horribly embarrassing things that a big company might do that a newspaper might call them on, like what's happening with Rupert Murdoch right now. But what's happening today is that the Internet has become a third pressure on companies. It's not just the government. It's not just the mainstream media. Anybody on the Internet can complain about any company that they want. And it doesn't have to be a big company. It could be a small company. And so what's starting to happen is that companies are beginning to come under pressure for doing things that they might have gotten away with before only because people on the Internet can call them on it. And so sometimes it's pressure groups that are using the Internet, like in this situation where PETA is complaining about the behavior of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Other times, what will happen is that not only will a pressure group or even individuals complain about the behavior of a company, but what's also happening is that the companies then respond. And maybe they respond badly. I mean, this is a famous example where someone complained to the president of Spirit Airlines, and when he sent his reply out, he meant to send it to only the people in his company, but he hit the reply all button on his email client and sent it actually back to the original flyer who had complained. And he said, hey, let them tell the world how bad we are. Well, they did. They put it on their blog, and they said, here's what the deal is. And so all of these things are changing the Internet marketing and marketing as a whole. The Internet is causing pressure to come against companies that have never been there before. And the question we want to ask ourselves is, what do we do when the same old ain't working? So we like to say to ourselves, hey, it's only business, it's nothing personal. And the problem is that the web makes everything personal. Everybody now has their personal voice on the web, and they can say and do what they want to do. They are not constrained by the money required to get things into mainstream media or the influence required to get the government to do something. Instead, they can use the Internet to voice whatever complaint they want. And so the question is, in the midst of all these changes, as we're seeing all of these things happening, do we think somehow that search engine optimization does not have any of these pressures on it? Do we think that we can continue to fool everybody in the way we do SEO? Now, there are people out there that do fool everybody. I know some of them. They're called black hat SEO experts. They are extremely smart and hardworking people. They fool Google, they fool searchers, and you know what? If that's the way that you can make a living and it works for you, I have no problem with it. It's not against the law. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Here's what I'll say. My bet is that there's nobody here on this phone call that's capable of being a black hat SEO, because if you were, you wouldn't be sitting out there listening to me right now. You'd have a lot better things to do with your time. There's nothing I'm going to be able to teach you that will help you fool Google. And so that's the thing to think about, is that even though these tricks may work for a small segment of people, it's possible that there are people out there that make a living, time in, time out, year in, year out, fooling Google. The truth is that there's very few of us, and those people, and most of us can't do things like that. And the other question is, even if you were able to do it, even if somehow you thought you could fool Google, or you could hire somebody who's smart enough to fool Google, all of these pressures that we talked about on the Internet mean that the publicity that you would get when found out could be really crippling for your business. So, and it's not theoretical. Look at the kinds of things that we've seen already. Just in the last few years, large companies have been caught doing this and have been excoriated all over the web for their lapse in ethics, for fooling people, for fooling Google, for trying to take advantage, for being tricksters, for being unethical. And so BMW was caught doing a black hat technique called cloaking, which is when You have one page that you present to the search engines and another page you present to everybody else. So it's kind of like a bait and switch scheme for the search engines. J.C. Penney and the New York Times. I mean, all of these companies have been caught. And so how do these things happen, right? What happens then is that all of these companies then get brought up in front of these in the media. So BMW was banned by Google. The New York Times had a story on J.C. Penney explaining this elaborate scheme that they had where they were actually paying people in return for getting links to their site, and that became a scandal. And so what does this do to your brand? What is people's enduring brand image of your company if they see you doing these kinds of tricks, right? If they see you tricking Google, why would they think that you wouldn't be trying to trick them? Why wouldn't they think that you're going to be this kind of sharp operator who just is out for themselves? And you get this bad news, and the other thing that happens is that you cause people to think worse of you. None of that sounds like it's good for your marketing. And the other thing about this is that they were caught. Even though they thought they were very clever, they weren't clever enough to actually have it keep working. So you want to think about this, but it goes way beyond black hat techniques. I want you to think about your whole approach to SEO. Are you optimizing or are you connecting? I mean, SEO, the O stands for optimization. And so all along in the language, we've said to ourselves, we're optimizing. And what I want to do is to say, let's think differently about SEO. Let's think about connecting rather than optimizing. So instead of saying to ourselves, let's research the most popular keywords, let's say figure out what our customers are looking for. Instead of saying we're going to rewrite our copy to use those words, say, let's use the same language that our customers use. Instead of saying we're going to conduct link campaigns to boost our page rank, let's say we want to create really helpful content that cause others to link to us naturally. I'm telling you that it comes out to be the same effect, but the attitude you take will make all the difference, because instead of trying to understand some very kind of small piece of technical advice about what to do that the search engines are looking for, instead you're going to take actions that work in a broad way. And so as the search engines change their algorithms, then what you're doing is still going to work because you had the right attitude. If you have the wrong attitude and you're just going after these things, it's not going to work. So for example, suppose you said we're going to rewrite our copy to use all these keywords. Well, a few years ago, what did the search engines do? They stopped looking at only the keywords on the page, and they started looking at the theme of the page. They started looking at all the different things that you might talk about when you're talking about that subject. And people who had just optimized, all they had done was write pages full of keywords, their pages started to rank lower. And the people who wrote content that actually made sense, that was talking about the subject, that was high quality, they had enough keywords on the pages, but they had all the other words that the search engines were expecting too. So if you do this kind of very small, technically focused advice, then you're just waiting for the search algorithm to change. If instead you're focused on what's really good for the searcher, then what you're doing is always going to work. And in fact, it'll probably start to work better and better and better. So if we focus on what our customers need, some of that means we have to think about where they are in the buying cycle. So instead of just focusing on the catalog when they're shopping for something, do we focus on learn content? Do we focus on the problems they're having? Do we focus on the kinds of things that they're concerned about, the needs that they have? Do we focus earlier in the cycle? That's an area where we can really help customers the most. Here's an example of that. So Home Depot is giving away how-to information. They've posted hundreds of how-to videos on YouTube. They tell you how to do repair jobs in the house or small home improvements, and they teach you step-by-step how to do it. What does Home Depot get out of this? They're helping the customer. Their hope is that the customer will come to Home Depot and buy some stuff from them, which is great. And they're trusting that enough people will do that this is worth their while. But they're helping the customers. They're improving their brand image. These are the kinds of things that search engines are going to link to because it's very helpful. This is what other people are going to link to. People are going to call it out in social media. Search engines are going to find it because all of this is what causes search engines to say it's quality content. So let's think about a really specific example of optimizing versus connecting. If we go back a few years, there was this really neat technique that people discovered called page rank sculpting. And what it did was, if you went through your website and you really focused on changing the way the internal links work through the site, so that you made sure links linked to some pages inside your site and they didn't link to others, and they held back from links to other places, you could really affect your search rankings. It really made a difference. Now, it didn't do anything for your customers. There was nothing about it that made things better for searchers at all, but it did help your search rankings. If, on the other hand, you said, well, we're not going to work on that because that's just optimizing, that's like this very technical, arcane thing that doesn't help anybody. If instead you said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put all our money behind social media. Now, back in 2006, the search engines didn't display social media. They didn't do anything to affect the ranking, but it was really good for your customers. And so you had these choices, right? Are you going to connect with your customers, or are you going to do some kind of tricky advice that just optimizes things for now? And so think about which one you might have worked on if you were in SEO back then. And then you look at how it turned out. So the way it turned out is that PageRank sculpting worked really well for a while. And then what happened is Google changed the algorithm so that PageRank sculpting didn't work anymore. And then it immediately plummeted. On the other hand, social media didn't help very much at all for a while, but then Google launched universal search, and it started showing all this social media content on the screen. And since then, all the search engines have done the same thing, and they're starting to use social media activity as part of the ranking algorithm. And so that turned out really, really well in the long term, even though at the beginning it looked like a dumb idea because it wasn't going to help your search rankings at all. Now, you might say that it was just bad luck. You know, that, hey, you know, we picked the wrong thing. Anybody could have guessed wrong. But the truth is that if you do something that helps everyone, it helps you, it helps Google, and it helps the searchers, that will get rewarded and get reinforced over and over time. But if you do something that only helps you, like PageRank sculpting, that's not going to work for very long. Eventually, the search engine's going to say, well, that's not helping anybody. I'm going to change the algorithm so that doesn't work anymore. And so you can say, well, hey, why don't we just, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Use it while it works. If PageRank sculpting will work for a while, then we'll do it. But here's the thing that happens with that. And PageRank sculpting is a great example. Google changed the algorithm in early 2008, but it didn't announce that it changed it until a year later. And during that year, if you go back and look at all the smart people on the message boards, there were loads of people saying, you know, I don't know if this is working. And there were lots of people saying, absolutely, it's working, it's working, it's working, all the way up until the point that Google says, you know, we actually changed that a year ago. It doesn't work anymore. And so you spent this whole year working on PageRank sculpting when maybe you could have been working on social media. And so all that effort ended up wasted. And so this isn't really about spamming or black hat SEO. Most of us don't do that. But what really we're trying to tell you is you shouldn't be examining the terms of service like some kind of legal agreement. You know, where's my loophole here? How can I get around that? How can I do something that won't ban me but will still work? If instead you look at connecting, and you're connecting to the search engine and the searchers, so you're really trying to do something that works for everybody. It makes searching better. It makes the results for the searchers better. It gives the searchers what they want. It helps Google. It helps you. If it helps everybody, that will be rewarded more and more over time, and social media is a great example. So what are optimizers talking about now? Well, I hear a lot of them talking about they're creating all these fake personalities for social media. They're creating content farms. You know, they've got all these imaginary friends and bogus content, and they're doing all these elaborate ways of linking to each other and having conversations among these fake people. And there are some people who are telling me that this is working. It's fooling the search engines. They're getting their rankings up. But I guarantee you the search engines are trying to stop it because it doesn't help the search engines, it doesn't help the searchers. And so you're just cruising for the day when it doesn't work anymore. And most of us, that's not the way to go. And so I would argue this is a battle you really can't win. I mean, maybe a few black hat SEOs that are much smarter than me and harder working than me can win, but you and I can't win it. And I want to give another recent example. So there was a very big change in Google's ranking algorithm called Panda that happened a few months ago. And the change was really remarkable because what Google is doing now is they're actually using human beings to evaluate the websites. They're rating each website with a human being. And then what they're using is something called machine learning, which is a technology that actually takes human ratings and it then makes conclusions about other websites. So what it'll do is if they've rated a whole bunch of sites that sell shoes, then what they'll do is they'll take a whole bunch of other sites that sell shoes, and then they'll look to see how the highly rated ones match the other ones. And so then they'll, even if your site was never rated by a human being, they'll look and see which similarities there are between the highly rated sites and the other sites, and they'll assume that the ones that are similar are actually good and the other ones are not. And so now more than ever, you want to do what the searchers want, because the searchers are actually part of the algorithm. If they think you have a quality site, then you'll get a high rating, or the machine learning algorithm will say that your sites are similar to the sites that got a high rating, and then you're going to get higher rankings in the search engine. So then the question we have is, what's stopping us from doing this? Why is it that we constantly seem like we want to cut corners, not just in SEO, but in everything? We say things to ourselves like, everybody does it this way, we've always done it this way, I will never get my boss to go along, it might cost us money in the short run, and all of those things are true. But you know, most of your customers are really trying to like you. And if you think about it, if everybody is doing it this way, then if you do something different, that's a way of differentiating. That's a way of doing something that other people aren't doing, and it's only something that your customers would like. And so instead of worrying about all the bad publicity or worrying about when Google's going to change the algorithm the next time, if you take this kind of approach, this different kind of philosophy, what you're going to find is the things you're doing will work for everybody. And that's what's going to get you where you need to go. So I know I had a lot to say, but luckily I wrote it all down. You might be interested in a couple of my books. Frank talked about how we both blog for Biznology, so we'd love for you to come there. We're going to have another webinar next month about optimizing your website search. So how do you make your website search better? And this really is about optimization, because you're not fooling anybody. They're already on your website, and you have to figure out how to make that website search engine work a lot better than most of them do now. And so I know we have a couple of minutes left. I hope you guys had some questions, and I'd love to take them now. Frank?
Thanks, Mike. I'm sure our attendees have a much stronger idea of how to apply legitimate marketing practices to SEO, because you hear enough about the other way to do it. But obviously you didn't answer every question. We have several good ones from our audience, and they're teed up for you. I'd like to remind our audience that it's not too late to ask your own question by typing it into the questions box in your GoToWebinar controls. But our first question is, there's a concern here. What if I do something that is black hat by accident? What if I got some bad advice from a consultant? Do I have any recourse with Google?
You do. I mean, the first thing you need to do is to discover what it was you did, or to discover that you did anything at all. I mean, one of the things that can happen is you might suddenly find that your search traffic trickles to about 0 from at least one of the search engines. Then you want to check to see if your pages are still in the search index. You can do this by going to Google Webmaster Tools and see what it has listed there. Sometimes Google's even nice enough that in Webmaster Tools it will tell you that your site's been flagged and what the problem is. It might be flagged for all sorts of different reasons, but I have clients that they've had a message come up in Google Webmaster Tools that says, we're detecting a problem here, and so that's why your rankings have been downgraded, or that's why your pages have been removed from the index. And so what we do at that point is you first have to fix the problem. So whatever it is it's identifying, if you don't understand how to fix it, you need to get an expert in that can. The second thing to do is, once it is fixed, is you apply for reconsideration by Google or by the other search engines that have taken this action against you. And what that involves is, and that's something in Google you can do from Webmaster Tools as well, you can put in a reconsideration request in which you tell Google, I understand what I was doing wrong. You can explain all the things that you said in the question. I hired a consultant. The consultant gave me bad advice. I followed the advice. I realized that I'm responsible for what happened, but once I knew that it was wrong, I immediately changed it. The site is now fixed. It doesn't make that mistake anymore. Can you please reconsider and take the penalty off my search rankings, or put my pages back in the index, or whatever the problem is? Now, sometimes it can take Google a little while to do that, but there are lots of clients that I've worked with that have gone through that process for the same reason that Frank that the questioner asked about, which is they were working with somebody else who was really, really tricky and clever and had all these lovely techniques, but they eventually backfired, and then they needed help to dig their way out of it. So there is a way out, but it's also important that you be careful not to hire somebody like that. And one of the ways that you can avoid hiring somebody like that is to, when you're looking to hire a consultant for SEO, ask them, hey, you know, I heard there's a lot of tricky techniques out there. Do you know any of them? That's what I really need. I need somebody who really knows all this secret stuff. If you get somebody who says, oh, yeah, I know them all, I can tell you what to do, I can fool Google, then you run in the other direction. And if you get somebody who says, oh, no, that's not the way to do it, please don't work that way, that's a mistake, you don't want that, then you have the right person. And so that's a way of figuring out who you're hiring so that you never get into that situation.
That's great advice, Mike. Thanks. Oh, excuse me. I have another question here. Somebody is concerned because they have competitors that they know are using these black hat techniques. You know, they can see what's going on, and they've asked, what can I do if I know competitors using these black hat techniques? What are my options to report them?
You can report them. You can report them to each of the search engines. You can explain exactly what it is you see, and you can and let the nature take its course. That's absolutely legitimate. There's no reason why you should let that just go by. Now, it's possible that things that you think are black hat techniques are actually not against the rules. I mean, a lot of us say, hey, oh, man, you know, those guys are cheating, they're tricking people. It could be that things that we think are black hat techniques are actually technically okay under the rules. And so don't be 100% sure that your judgment about what's a black hat technique will mirror what the search engines think. But absolutely, you can turn them in, and you can ask for them to be looked at. Now, but just understand that if you are really sure that what they're doing is wrong, trust me, if you keep doing the right things, eventually the search algorithms are going to change, and that technique will stop working. Or eventually the search engines will discover what they're doing and put a stop to it. So in the long run, you might have to suffer for a while because they're doing these tricky things, but in the long run, if you stick to doing things the right way, you're going to find that you'll come out well in the end.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mike. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, and it has come up on 11:30 Eastern here. So that is all the time that we have for today. And I want to thank Mike for his great ideas, and thanks especially to our audience for your participation and your questions. That's always fantastic, and we encourage that every time you come back to each of the webinars here with Biznology. If any of you had questions that we did not have time to answer, you can email your question to Eileen. It's EILEEN at MikeMoranGroup.com, and she'll be sure to get them to Mike for the answer. Later this week, we'll send you all a link to the recording of this webinar to listen to again and to share with others, so we would appreciate it if you would share it with others through Twitter, Facebook, whatever. We also invite you to mark your calendars for our next Biznology webinar, which is Optimize Your Website Search. And it's scheduled for 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. on October 25th, 2011. So thank you very much again, everybody, for taking time to be with us, and have a great month.